Friday, June 26th. This is SamCentre. As always, I'm your host, Sam. Thank you for taking time out of your busy day, out of your busy week to be here with us. We have an extremely exciting UFC Friday episode. The UFC is in Baku, Azerbaijan for a fight night, although it's going to be in the daytime for us over in North America due to the time difference. And the PFL actually has an exciting main card happening in the evening. So if you're a fan of fights, lots for us to talk about to end the card. We have breaking news in the NBA with trades. We have the World Cup continuing to roll. Canada wearing the jersey on my chest. We qualified past the group stage for the first time in World Cup history. It's an extreme accomplishment for the Canadian men's national team. We'll talk about Lionel Messi, Cristiano Ronaldo, Kylian Mbappe, all of the stars in action at the World Cup, as well as the CFL continues to roll. There's so many exciting matchups. The league once again proving why you should be tuning in every Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, whatever game the days are on. So let's get into the breaking news section of our show. LaMelo Ball is heading to the Minnesota Timberwolves in exchange for a large package of draft picks, pick swaps, and most importantly, Naz Reid. Naz Reid is a sixth man for the Minnesota Timberwolves, or was. He now will be heading to the Charlotte Hornets, and it's an interesting move. I think it came out of nowhere after the Giannis trade. Maybe Charlotte was starting to realize that they could see those teams who missed out on Giannis. They might be desperate for a superstar, and Minnesota became the clear favorite. They didn't have to give up Rudy Gobert. They didn't have to give up a large piece of their core, but what they had to do was give up multiple future pick swaps, a future first round pick, and then someone in Naz Reid who was consistent coming off the bench, filling in as a starter, defending at a high level, rebounding, and then providing you scoring when you needed it. So he will be sorely missed, but we talk often that usually the team who got the better player won the trade. And if that holds true, Minnesota did win the trade because LaMelo Ball is a true superstar. He's not somebody that you're going to build a NBA championship team with him as the number one and only scoring option. And it's rare that you can do that with a point guard in the NBA. But what he can do is provide you primary playmaking and ball handling to take a lot of the pressure off of Anthony Edwards and the rest of that Minnesota offense. I think one of the biggest problems for them is that Anthony Edwards is a pure shooting guard who was kind of forced to play that hybrid guard role. And in the same way that Kobe Bryant thrived when he had somebody that he could play like a Derek Fisher or somebody who could take the ball out of his hands and play off ball with, but put the ball in his hands when you need to. That will be what you do in Minnesota now. When the game's on the line, you have two real options who can score now. Whereas before, teams could just focus on Anthony Edwards and your offense became quite stagnant because he's not the playmaker who can really make guys like Rudy Gobert and other players with offensive limitations shine. Where they're really hoping LaMelo Ball is that. He's young. He's a superstar in the league as far as marketability. The Ball family has been around for years. They have their own sitcom. They're quite a well-known family, obviously, with all three brothers having good, successful basketball careers, and their dad being quite the character. So Minnesota gets a real star, a guy who can come in there, play alongside Anthony Edwards. Anthony Edwards and LaMelo Ball were both selected within the top 3 picks of the 2020 NBA draft, so we're reuniting that draft class, playing alongside Rudy Gobert. And there's question marks around LaMelo Ball's long-term health. Maybe if he can keep up, stay at that pace and the longevity for the rest of his career, but he's young and he's shown that he could play well in Charlotte. His last home game in Charlotte was him scoring a very clutch basket to give them a win before they went back and obviously didn't make the playoffs, losing in the play-in. But this guy is clutch when it matters. He can score points, he can pass, and he will have defensive limitations that I think will be covered up by the Minnesota Timberwolves. As far as the Charlotte Hornets, I'm not entirely sure what you're doing here. Maybe mitigating risk and saying, hey, we really believe in Knuppel and we believe in the rest of our core here, which fair enough. You get an extremely good piece in Naz Reid. You have a core that's young with Miller, with Knuppel. So there's some stars over in Charlotte, but you had a young, controllable point guard, a guy that was marketable and a team that people were excited about. And now you're trading him over for draft picks. in the future. So maybe it works out for you. Maybe you're going to play differently. But it just seems like Charlotte is willing to keep repeating the same cycle over and over again, where you get these stars, you start to build something, and then you just trade them away, or you let them leave in free agency, where Ball was willing to stay. He was willing to sign long-term there. Maybe I'll be proven wrong once the season actually gets going. Maybe that draft pick will turn into something. But I just think if you're a small market team, you don't give up on a young star that early. Big win, I think, for Minnesota on this. It's obviously a big gamble. I'm not entirely sure where this puts them in the West. I think overall they're going to be probably top 4 now, but there's stiff competition in the West. If we were out East, we'd be talking about this probably being one of the top 2 squads, similar to how Miami now propels himself in there. But, we're really going to have to see maybe more moves to come. There's rumors around Jaylen Brown, around the Toronto Raptors and other teams potentially wanting to make a move. And SamCentre will be here to cover it. Before we get into the rest of the show, I think we're missing something. Let's run the intro. All right, guys, let's wrap up the rest of the weekly recap and look ahead a little bit to the weekend. I want to talk World Cup for just a moment. You see the jersey as we spoke about. You see the scarf above my head. Team Canada was able to advance to the knockout stage for the first time in history. They didn't have a ton of success as a country, obviously. In soccer, we are more of a hockey nation, but with some of our harder losses that we've taken recently, this one feels really good. To be a host nation, and obviously it would have been extremely nice to beat Switzerland and have the round of 32 be in Canada in front of all of our rabid fans. Instead, they have to go down to LA, play a game down there against South Africa, which is honestly an extremely winnable game for Canada. So I will not count our chickens before they hatch, but I think Canada, you have a great chance to extend your run even farther, but at the very least, this is an accomplishment for our country, being a host nation, making it to the knockout stage, as well as the other 2 nations making it, who were the co-host in Mexico, who went undefeated, and in the United States as well, advancing past the group stage into the knockout stage. Many other stars are going to be there as well. We're talking about Lionel Messi becoming the World Cup greatest goal scorer in history. And he was already the greatest goal scorer, the greatest player, whatever you want to say. There was a debate between him and Ronaldo and many other players. But I think Messi's legacy is cemented forever. He now has the most goals ever at the World Cup. That record may not last for long, though. We have Kylian Mbappe, who is 4 goals behind Messi. Both of them will be in action for the rest of this World Cup as long as their runs go, with both Argentina and France extending their runs into the knockout stage. Kylian Mbappe and Lionel Messi will have multiple chances to score. But this is Messi's last run. He's at 18 goals, where Mbappe is 27. So you could realistically envision 2 more World Cups where Mbappe is the focal point of the France team. And if he's only 4 goals behind, he may even catch up this World Cup, or will most likely break that record. So we're witnessing some extremely high-level action. Cristiano Ronaldo being in multiple World Cups. We had the Mexican legends retiring on the field 20 years after making his debut in Stadium Azteca. It's been a really cool thing to watch. And I think as somebody who is a very, very much casual non-enjoyer of soccer, I've become a casual enjoyer of the World Cup. Props to this format. Props to Team Canada, Team Mexico, Team USA. It's good that all 3 of the host nations have advanced. Unfortunately, Canada was not able to host a round of 32 game, where Mexico and the US respectively will both be hosting their next games, which will be an advantage, right? Having that many home crowd and not having it is going to make a difference. But I can't imagine LA is that much heavier for South Africa compared to Canada. So probably a true neutral site there, unlike the CFL. But I wanted to talk about the CFL really quickly. Let me throw it down to our special guest, Sideline Sammy Sidelines. He was live at Commonwealth Stadium today, and he's going to talk the 3 remaining CFL games on our weekend slate before I get a little obnoxious with our Edmonton Elk breakdown against the Winnipeg Blue Bombers.
Thank you, Sam. This is Sammy Sidelines reporting live from Commonwealth Stadium. We still have 3 incredible games left on the CFL schedule for this week. We have the Toronto Argonauts heading to Regina to play their home game against the Saskatchewan Roughriders. As we talked about on Wednesday's show, this is a neutral site game. As the Toronto Argonauts Stadium is currently being held for World Cup games where Canada and other nations are playing at the moment. And so the solution is to play a home game against the Riders in Regina. Again, this is going to work out well for Toronto, probably one of their higher attended games of the year. Sold out crowd, I'm sure, mainly green, going to be a great time. We're going to move on to our Kelowna game, another true neutral site game, this time with the BC Lions getting their home game in BC. Their stadium is also being taken by the World Cup, so they're taking on the Calgary Stampeders in the first edition of the Kelowna Series games. They will play the Edmonton Elks the following week in Kelowna as well. My prediction, I would lean BC. It's going to be a very tight game. 2 teams 0-2 that cannot afford to start 0-3. And in our final game of the week, we have the Ottawa Red Blacks after their massive trade, trading away Drew Brown, signing McLeod Bethel-Thompson. They're in Montreal to take on the Alouettes. The Alouettes just lost on this field right behind me to the Edmonton Elks, as we predicted, and now they are looking to bounce back, keep themselves at the top of the Eastern Conference. It should be a very, very winnable game against Ottawa. I would think this is a blowout, maybe the one blowout that we see of the week. Montreal, the official prediction. Saskatchewan, NBC. Let's talk about it Monday. Back to you, SamCentre.
Thank you, Sidelines. And Sammy is right. There's 3 more exciting matchups for you to tune into on this week 4 of the CFL all weekend long. I don't know why you would want to watch anything else, and that was proven again Thursday, June 25th. As I'm recording this, the Edmonton Elks went into Princess Auto Stadium and defeated the Winnipeg Blue Bombers by a score of 23-18. And this score, if you just look at it, you would think clear win for the Elks. It was close. And that was kind of not the story of the game. The Elks went up extremely early, 17-0, and the game felt like it was going to be over by halftime. Winnipeg consistently was shooting themselves in the foot, making errors after error, whether it was fumbles, whether it was simply not converting on drives or opportunities when you had it, or it was not protecting Zach Collaros, because that offensive line, you could tell they were missing their starting center and scrambling last moment. The Elks were getting consistent pressure. Zach Collaros had nowhere to go with the football. Brady Oliveira could not get past that defensive line, and it was 17-0 about 15 to 18 minutes into the game. And you were thinking in your head, okay, the Elks are rolling tonight. It's going to be one of those games. Maybe we'll see a blowout. But never in the CFL. It's the same thing we saw with the Calgary-Saskatchewan game last week, where a comeback was mounted and the momentum started because the Elks gave up a touchdown late in the first half to the Winnipeg Blue Bombers. And now that always gives a team some juice heading into halftime. They believe, okay, we're at home. We can come back from this. And to their credit, that's what Winnipeg did. They were able to claw back in the second half. Justin Rankin had over 90 yards rushing in the first half and only finished the game with 106 yards rushing total. So in the second half, the game plan started to work. You saw the Winnipeg Blue Bombers force some turnovers, shut down Justin Rankin, and the Elks said they had some communication issues between the offensive line and Cody Fajardo. Now, if that's the case, that could lead to some of those stalled drives for sure, but the game plan was better for Winnipeg. Shut down the ground game, force the Elks to make plays in the pass game, and that wasn't happening. So Winnipeg was able to claw their way back and actually took the lead 18-17 in that fourth quarter and late into the fourth quarter. And so now you're thinking, right? Okay, classic double lead. This is where the wheels fall off. They had a great first game, a good, tough win against Montreal in the pouring rain, but they go into Winnipeg, they blow the game. This is what they do every year, right? But not this version of the double lead. Not Mark Killam, not Cody Fajardo, not Justin Rankin. This team is not interested in losing games and just letting teams beat them late. So the Elks go down, take the football, and run the length of the field, eating a ton of clock, and they put it in late with a late touchdown pass from Cody Fajardo. And that was the big moment in the game. This drive from Edmonton controlling the clock, taking it down well under a minute, and then all of a sudden Winnipeg, even though they got a very good return back to about midfield on the ensuing kickoff, there just wasn't enough time left in the game to mount a comeback when Edmonton can play their defense back and just force you to throw. Because that offensive line is still shaky. Even when the Elks, to their credit, they did start to blitz a little bit near the end of the game, but they didn't even really have to. Consistent pressure was getting to Collaros the entire game, and that forced the issue. So for Winnipeg, it might make a difference if your center is healthy, but now you're 1-2 and you're going to face Hamilton on the road, a team that you just lost to in your home building by 10 points. And so if you drop that game, you're looking at still one win with potentially Edmonton, Saskatchewan, BC. Who knows how these next games flip? That could make a big difference in where you are in the standings and how many games you have to make up. Obviously, there's no major controversy in the QB room or anything like that, but I think Winnipeg has some flaws that were exposed today. If they cannot rely on Brady Oliveira, they really are quite non-explosive on offense. The Elks, to their credit, are an extremely well-coached, good and well-disciplined defense. So it could be an example of the Elks making them look bad. But 3-0, baby. First time since 2017 for the Double E. For myself, being involved with the team for 4 years, this is obviously the best start that I've ever seen. It gives me a little bit of hope that we will at least see a playoff game, knock on wood, and hopefully a home playoff game. But we will not count our chickens before they hatch because this is the CFL. They say season doesn't start till Labor Day, and there's a lot of weeks to go in that case. But what we're looking at here is a prime example of winning games early. And people say, okay, it's early on in the season, but the Elks don't care. These are games that matter. And at the end of the season, whether you end up with 9 wins, 10 wins, whatever it looks like, if you got 3 in your first 3 games, you set yourself up for success, having the best running back in football, but having Cody Fajardo really step up and show that he is a really experienced, a championship caliber quarterback. He led a game-winning drive on the road in a hostile environment in Winnipeg when the crowd was going crazy, and the team had already been struggling in the second half. Other quarterbacks and other teams would have crumbled, but Cody Fajardo did not. The Edmonton Elks are undefeated, alone at first place in the CFL for now at the very least, heading over to Kelowna next week, a game that I will be attending live, trying to get you guys some content, filming it, looking to start 4-0. That would be massive for the franchise, but at the very least, 3-1, an excellent start. They'll be taking on the BC Lions, where Winnipeg will head over to Hamilton to take on the Tiger Cats. Now, let's talk UFC Friday. Baku, we have the PFL San Diego as well. Let's get into it. Okay, let's wrap up the show. Let's talk UFC, but let's say it's MMA Friday today because the PFL is putting on a San Diego card in the evening while the UFC is over in Baku, Azerbaijan in the morning, at least for us in North America time. So really, if you are a fan of mixed martial arts, if you're a fan of just watching fights in general, I'm going to give you all of the fights on the main card for the UFC, as well as maybe 1 or 2 on the PFL for why you could tune into at least the main card over there. But let's start with the UFC. We have some interesting matchups. We have Mikel Okel and Zaychuk taking on Abus Magomedov. And I told you earlier in the week I would mispronounce some names, but I think I did okay in that sense. Mikel Okel and Zaychuk is an experienced UFC man, as well as Abus Magomedov. Both guys have fought pretty high-level competition at 185 pounds. Abus Magomedov now being the older fighter at 35 years old. And I think you're going to see that where the fact that he's kind of not necessarily quit, but given up a little bit in fights in the past. I'm going to lean Mikel in this matchup. I think the younger man, the man fighting kind of in his part of the world, is going to really put on a show. Obviously, I think it could be over quickly, but both guys being experienced, having respect for each other's power, this fight definitely could go the distance. As for Abus Magomedov, I think this could very well be one of his last fights in the UFC. I don't really see a path to him ever getting to the title at 185 pounds. He was obviously the closest when he took on Sean Strickland and lost that fight. But as for Mikkel, another guy that you won't really ever see challenge for the belt, but it's a fun matchup, a fun fight for us to open up the UFC Baku main card. And I think you should tune in because I would anticipate an early finish. Official pick though is going to be Mikkel. Moving up the card, I'm going to say these names correctly for sure. Ikram Aliskerov taking on Bruno Ferreira, the Hulk. And it's going to be one of these things where a lot of people will think it's clear cut, where Ikram Aliskerov has this name. He's got the OV fighting in the Middle East. If a name ends with OV in the Middle East, he's winning. But it's not as clear cut as that because he's not a traditional of Magomedov, whatever you want to call them, right? But he goes out there, he can put hands on guys, he has a lot of wins by knockout, he can wrestle a little bit, he'll clinch you up against the fence, and he's taking on Bruno Ferreira, who I think is more, at this point of his career, a guy who's going to go out there and look for the knockout, probably not be super dynamic in a lot of other ways. I mean, to his credit, he has a more recent win against Marvin Vettori, which is an excellent win that's aged pretty well, but losing quite clearly in his last fight and losing it early to Gregory Rodriguez. RoboCop being a very much scary opponent, a guy who can put almost anyone out early. So it's not the worst case scenario. In this matchup, though, he's going to be the sacrificial lamb for Ikram, who's fighting in front of his home crowd over there in Azerbaijan. I think that looking at Ikram's record, looking at his fights, I'm not entirely sold on him being extremely high level, but he has 2 losses in his entire fight career. He has 17 wins, 2 losses, and I'm going to tell you who those 2 losses are. Khamzat Chimaev, early on in a promotion that I've never heard of, and then Bobby Knuckles, Robert Whittaker. And obviously Robert Whittaker, funny enough, both were from an uppercut, and I watched the tape on that Khamzat fight. He got knocked out by Khamzat by an uppercut, and then obviously the fight against Whittaker took the uppercut and then took some ground and pound after that and was finished early in round 1. And the rest of his wins have been clear-cut victories. So I think his only danger here is taking some early shots from Bruno Ferreira and having that chin be tested. If that doesn't happen, I think Ikram Aliskerov is going to look like extreme value at under -300. I would just maybe hedge if you're going to bet on him with a Bruno Ferreira first round finish. Moving up the card, we have one of the more confusing fights that I will ever break down for you. I don't know how to break this down because it's Charles Johnson taking on Asu Almabayev. And Asu Almabayev is a very good striker, a little bit undersized at 125 pounds. And how is that possible? I mean, I'm not a very big frame myself, I'll admit, but how are you undersized at 125 pounds? Where he's taking on a Charles Johnson who is extremely experienced. But this is probably Charles Johnson's last chance at really showing he deserves to fight for the title. Being 35 years old at 125 pounds, usually not the greatest recipe for success. In this matchup, though, it is going to be a matter of which Charles Johnson shows up. You know, do we get the Charles Johnson who's capable of beating the top of the top, beating Joshua Van? Or do we get the guy who essentially is going out there point fighting, looking to win not necessarily the moments, but just the minutes against a guy in Asu Almabayev who's going to be explosive, looking to do real damage, potentially in front of a more pro home-ish crowd for Asu? I think it could be quite dangerous for Charles Johnson to drop a decision or potentially be finished early on in this fight. But if it goes late, you could see who I think is clearly the better striker in Charles Johnson start to take over. He put hands on Joshua Van late, and he finished him in round 3. Joshua Van is the current champion of the world. So when you look at Charles Johnson, there's a real reason to believe he could challenge for a belt, that he could challenge the top of the division. But then he goes out there and fights to a split decision against guys that he should not be fighting to decisions against, right? And so you look at Asu Almabayev, who really hasn't lost except for to top high-level competition himself as well. So extremely excited for this one. It really is a matter of which version of Charles Johnson shows up. I'm going to lean, though, Asu Almabayev in front of his home crowd, in front of his part of the world. I doubt that he'll be dropping this. It's obviously not his home country, but being over in Azerbaijan, being close to everything there, it's going to be more pro Asu. So, low confidence on that one, though, if you're going to bet it from any perspective. Nazim Sadykhov taking on Matthias Camilo. And this is one where I think, now this is a true hometown Azerbaijani Nazim Sadykhov. He is a guy that the UFC is putting out there in a position to win a fight in front of the home crowd as the featured fight before the co-main and main event. He is going to be looking to get the job done in convincing fashion. And I think he gets the job done against a Matthias Camilo who really isn't super experienced. I look at Matthias Camilo's experience outside of the UFC, and he's mainly just fighting regional guys. And to mixed results, he's looked okay in the cage, looking at the tape study, because you cannot always just go to Tapology and look at guys' fighter pages. But I really do think the UFC knows what they're doing with their matchup here. Nazim Sadykhov should be able to get a finish, should be able to really have the home crowd in Azerbaijan go extremely crazy, setting us up into the co-main, which could potentially be a bit of a snoozer. I think something, when I look at the line, it's exploded. I think, he's a large favorite. So Camilo has the wrestling chops. He has that Brazilian jiu-jitsu. But at this point in his career, if he's going to go out there and pull guard against a guy in the Middle East in front of his home crowd, I think he's going to get finished. Give me Sadykhov with pretty high confidence on that pick. Moving on. More names. Why isn't Mike Smith fighting on this card somewhere, right? Give me someone like that. We have Shara Magomedov, aka Shara Bullet, the guy with one eye, the ginger dragon. Maybe I'll put a picture of him up here. He looks terrifying, but he doesn't really fight terrifying, right? He does have a crazy spinning back fist highlight reel knockout in the UFC. And I think that was almost worst case scenario because we were all lied to into thinking that this guy's exciting. But he's not. He's a point fighter. He's a guy who's going to go out there and try to win the fights on the card. And he's probably going to do that against a guy in Michel Pereira, who essentially at this point in his career sucks. And I mean, he doesn't suck, but he kind of does, right? Like he goes out there and it looks like he's one of those Brazilians who potentially lied about his age. Because if this guy is 32 and I'm 3 years away from that, I'm terrified of what's about to happen. He has a lot of miles on his body. He's kind of phoning it in his UFC fights, right? He's going out there, putting up somewhat of a fight in different ways. Whereas Shara, on that part of the world, to his credit, Magomedov's been busy in grappling. He hasn't necessarily been busy in the UFC recently because it's kind of hard for him to get sanctioned two ways. I think he's probably, listen, I'm not going to accuse anyone of anything. This guy's probably a terrorist or has terrorist friends because he cannot get a visa to fight in the US or anywhere else in the world. And he has one eyeball and they call him the Bullet. Like this guy, I don't know what's going on here. I won't say anything because I value my life, but this guy is terrifying and he's going to go out there and literally jab and be low volume and do almost nothing. And that is probably going to be enough against Michel Pereira. He's probably going to take home a boring unanimous decision or a split decision based off of the bias in that part of the world. The UFC knows what they're doing with Shara Bullet, keeping him in the Middle East, allowing him to fight over there, giving him layup matchups. Another one where he's going to be something like a minus 400, probably deserving of it, but this is more of a fade on Michel Pereira, less of a bet on Shara Bullet. So keep that in mind when you're looking at any sort of a finish prop or anything like that. My official prediction is I actually do believe Shara Bullet does go out there and finish the fight inside the distance, but that's just because I want to believe this guy's not boring. The most likely call is he goes out there and wins a unanimous decision. Moving on to our main event, we have the other hometown guy in Rafael Fiziev taking on Manuel Torres, product of Mexico, and it's a very interesting matchup. I actually laughed out loud looking at Manuel Torres' Tapology page. 12 out of his last 13 fights have ended in round one. And the one fight that didn't end in round one, I don't even know what this was. It was some random Mexican promotion, and they don't even say it went 3 rounds, and he fought a guy that was 2-0. So I think he just beat up on someone's brother in Mexico, and that's what they're calling it, whatever. I don't even know when that fight ended. But let's say 12 first round either wins, 11 of them have been wins, 1 has been a loss, decision, or knockout victories or submissions in the first round for Manuel Torres. And you're looking at this, the Mexican killer. This guy does not let the fight leave the first round. Either I die in there or you do. His only loss being to Ignacio Bahamondes. And it's an interesting guy when you break down Manuel Torres, because he goes out there and he hits guys and they go down. He either gets a club and sub, he either gets a knockout clean, and it's been violent and it's been undeniable. It's not like he's been given only layups in the UFC. He's fought some names that you would know. And I think Manuel Torres is going to go out there and look to do real damage against a guy in Fiziev who he thinks, in his mind, is older, probably less durable than I am. Let's go put hands on him. And that could very well happen. If you bet Manuel Torres under 1.5, honestly, I mean, I can't really blame you, right? It does seem to be a smart path to victory. But Fiziev is not a bum. He went out there and his only losses recently are to extremely high level competition. You know, guys like Justin Gaethje and losing to Matthias Gamrot. These are guys that Manuel Torres has not fought. He has not fought at that level, where Fiziev's been at that level for years. And so if you're looking at it, a guy who is fighting in front of his home crowd, a guy who has proven to be durable. You saw what Justin Gaethje did to Paddy Pimblett. You saw what Justin Gaethje did to Ilia Topuria. Justin Gaethje can put serious damage on people, and Fiziev went out there and has survived with him multiple times. And recently too, right? So you start to look at things. It could be an example of where this fight could start to go long. And if Fiziev survives the early onslaught from a young Mexican guy who's looking to put damage on you, looking to get that fight ended in the first round, if he starts to break a little bit, it's going to be a veteran lesson, and we're going to see the hand raise for Rafael. Now, I struggle with this pick because when I do the tape study, I just look at Manuel Torres being such a hurricane in there that you have to survive that first round. Like, as much as it's first round or bust, that first round is going to be crazy. And I think Rafael Fiziev is going to be engaging in a war with him. He hasn't necessarily shone away from that sort of action in the past. So if the chin is still there, if the durability is still there, I think what you do is you live bet Rafael Fiziev after round 1 if the fight makes it out of it. The odds being extremely even right now feels fair to me. It feels like a complete toss-up of what's going to happen. I always want to lean Mexico, but I think this could be a veteran lesson. Give me Rafael Fiziev by either a finish over 1.5 rounds or a decision on the cards. And now let's wrap up the UFC show by moving on and talking about the Professional Fighting League, the PFL. There's actually a couple cards on their main event in San Diego, and this start time will be later in the day, where the UFC is going to happen earlier in the day. So the main card for the UFC will be around 12 noon Eastern time, whereas the PFL, I believe, is 7 or 8 p.m. Eastern time, so later in the day. And let's say the main card at least is worth tuning into, and the 2 fights, you might recognize the name here, 2 of them. Liz Carmouche taking on Viviane Araújo. And Liz Carmouche, yeah, it's an incredible thing to talk about her still fighting at 42 years old inside of the PFL. She fought Ronda Rousey in 2013. She lost via armbar in round 1, but that's when Ronda was beating everyone via round 1 in armbar, and she survived more time than a lot of girls did. You know, she's fought Holly Holmes, she's fought a lot of the who's who in the women's MMA scene. Liz Carmouche is a legend as far as women's MMA goes. UFC, she actually fought Valentina Shevchenko inside the UFC and lost that, and then kind of moved on to other promotions from there. At 42 years old now, taking on a girl in Viviane Araújo, who has fought inside the UFC before, has some experience, has actually had some okay enough losses, right? Lost to Alexa Grasso by unanimous decision, has a few other decently high-level losses in the UFC. I'm going to lean with the younger girl here. Liz has obviously been winning and is obviously a legend. But when you give me a girl who could probably still compete in the UFC against a 42-year-old, I'm going to say Viviani gets it done inside the distance. And then the main event, another name that you will probably recognize is AJ McKee. He has not been to the UFC, but he has been a UFC Bellator main promotion for a long time. You know, one of their bigger stars and a guy that's still fairly young. And so his only losses have been to, you know, Pitbull and to a couple other guys who are fairly high level over in Bellator. And I'm not entirely sure that makes you a bad fighter, right? I just think he's a really good fighter for the PFL Bellator, a guy that they can put on the main events for their cards. In the UFC, he'd probably start to get exposed. You know, I don't even know if he'd necessarily be top 15, and that's okay. You know, he can do cards like this, and he's still exciting to watch. Taking on a guy, oh boy, here we go. Salamat Isbulaev. And I watched a little bit of tape study. Not entirely impressed. You know, he goes out there and he attempts to finish fights. But he's been fighting a lot of these guys in the PFL, where I don't think he's as high level as AJ is. AJ's fought the real killers out there with the Pitbulls, and other things where, this Isbulaev is 10-0, not quite at the level of experience as AJ McKee. Give me the official predictions for the co-main and main, with AJ McKee rounding out the PFL main card, San Diego. So that is the UFC MMA Friday show. We chatted all things CFL. There was World Cup in there, multiple other opportunities and exciting things for you to tune into this weekend. We're going to be back Victory Monday. We know one team's on there, the Double E. We'll see who is there. Let's run through and enjoy the rest of the weekend. Thank you guys so much for tuning in. As always, your likes, your comments, and your time is greatly appreciated. SamCentre out.
Yo, I'm sat on the throne, but I'm looking at the blueprints. Building a temple where the spirit leaves its footprints. Gibeonites, the most high asked what I'm needing. Didn't ask for peas or for enemies to be bleeding. I asked for the wisdom, the hokmah, the insight to distinguish the dark from the frequency of light. See, I built the first house, cedar, wood and gold plate between Jeshurun and Boaz. Standing at the gate, the pillars of the world, severity and mercy. The path is narrow, man, the road is getting thirsty, but the temple lays stone, that's the trick for the blind. The real masonry is the structure of the mind. Seal of the king, two triangles entwined. The lower reflecting the upper design. Master of the spirits, I made the demons work. Building up the temple where the shadows used to lurk. It's the wisdom of Solomon, the heavyweight crown. Building up the spirit while the system falling down. Building up the Yeah, they say I had the ring, the brass and the iron, commanding the glacier, the wolf and the lion. See, the demons are just facets of the ego and the greed. I harness the shadows to plant the holy seed. You gotta kill the beast, you gotta make it move the blocks. Put the vices in the furnace, turning keys inside the lock. 72 spirits, yeah, I kept them in the vessel. Every conscious man has a demon he must wrestle. If you don't control the lower, then the lower controls you. That's how the temple falls and the spirit gets through. I saw the vanity, they're chasing all the wind, but the wisdom is the treasure underneath the skin. I sat with the queen, yeah, Sheba brought the riddle, trying to find a set and not the sides or the middles. She saw the cupbearer, the order of the table. Realize that history is more than just a fable. It's the key of Solomon, the magic in the math. Finding your geometry on the righteous path. From the quarry to the corner, I'm the stone they rejected. To the master workman saw the spirit was perfected. Modern day Solomon, I'm building in ends, turning all the haters and the demons into friends. The temple is complete when the heart is in tune. From the rising of the sun to the setting of the moon. Vanity of vanities, all is vanity, unless you know the